to check the band names list and then write the story. The band names are Margaret, Daniel, Vivian, Carson, Lorraine, Claire, Nathan, Eddie, Gloria, Trevor, Patricia, Francis, Sylvie, Renata, Hector, Daphne, Judith, Wesley, Amber, Carol, Rose Calloway, Elliot, Evelyn, Raymond, Barbara Hollis, Theo, Ivy, Donovan, Nora Moss, Adrian, Celeste, Grant. New names I'll use: Miriam, narrator, 64, Owen, son, Jonah, gardener, loyal helper, Serena, bride, Kurt, Serena's secret husband, Zoe, Kurt's daughter. Wait, Zoe might be associated. I'll use different. Let me pick: Miriam, Owen, Jonah, Serena, Kurt, Lily, Kurt's child. I don't make a habit of telling this story at dinner parties. It's not the kind of thing you bring up over good wine and easy conversation. But my daughter-in-law, my real daughter-in-law, the one who came after all of this, she told me once that I should write it down. She said, "Someone needs to hear it, Mom." So here it is. My son Owen got engaged on a Tuesday in October. He called me from the parking lot of a restaurant, and I could hear the grin in his voice before he said a single word. He was 34. I had been quietly, patiently waiting for this call for years. Not in the pushy way, I hope, but in the way a mother waits for something she just knows is coming. He'd been lonely for a long time after his last relationship ended badly. So when he told me her name, when he said Serena, I didn't ask 100 questions. I just said, "Tell me everything." He did. He told me she was 31, that she worked in medical billing, that she had grown up in Savannah but moved north for work. He told me she was funny in that dry, quiet way he always loved. He told me she cried at the end of old movies, that she kept houseplants and actually kept them alive. He was so happy. I hadn't heard him sound like that in years. I met her 6 weeks later at a Sunday dinner I made at my house. Pot roast, green beans, the apple cake I've been making since Owen was 7 years old. I set the table with the good dishes. I wanted her to feel welcomed. I wanted to like her. And honestly, I did. At least I thought I did. She was pretty. Dark hair, green eyes, easy smile. She complimented my kitchen and asked about the photographs on the shelf above the fireplace. She held Owen's hand across the table. She thanked me twice for dinner. I drove her out of my mind exactly 0 times that evening, which is more than I can say for some of the women Owen had brought home before. So I was glad. I told myself I was glad, and I mostly meant it. The wedding was planned for the following September. A venue outside of Asheville, a restored farmhouse with a covered pavilion, string lights, mountain views. Serena had particular taste, and Owen was, in the way of most men who are very in love, happy to agree with whatever she wanted. The guest list was 60 people. The flowers were going to be white dahlias. I know because I was told, not because I was asked. That's not a complaint. Not exactly. Serena was the bride. It was her wedding. I understood that. But there were small things I noticed and then talked myself out of noticing. She didn't have a close relationship with her family, she'd said. Her parents were deceased. She had a brother somewhere, estranged. No close friends from childhood. She'd moved around a lot. That part I understood. Some people just don't accumulate the kind of long friendships that root you to a place. I've known people like that. But she didn't seem curious about our family either. She asked Owen questions, endlessly, warmly. But when she was with me, she was pleasant in the way that a person is pleasant when they're being careful. Like she was performing easiness rather than feeling it. Like she was always, just slightly, managing something. I told myself I was projecting. I told myself I was one of those mothers. I did not want to be one of those mothers. So I kept my mouth shut, and I helped address envelopes, and I drove 40 minutes to approve a cake tasting I hadn't been invited to until 2 days before. And then there was Jonah. Jonah had worked for our family for going on 19 years. He'd started when my husband Gerald was still alive, mowing the lawn and keeping the beds along the front of the house. After Gerald passed, he kept coming. I never asked him to. He just showed up the first Saturday after the funeral with his truck and his tools, and he got to work. And when I came outside to tell him he didn't have to do that anymore, he looked at me over the top of his sunglasses and said, "Mrs. Miriam, I know I don't have to." He'd been coming every 2 weeks ever since. He was 61. He had a daughter in college and a bad knee from an old roofing accident, and he made the best smoked ribs I have ever put in my mouth, a fact I have told him directly and without embarrassment. He was not a man who stuck his nose where it didn't belong. In 19 years, he had never once offered me an opinion I didn't ask for. So when he came to me 6 days before the wedding, hat in his hands, standing at the back door with that look on his face, that careful, reluctant look, I knew before he opened his mouth that something was wrong. "I need to show you something," he said, "and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." We sat at the kitchen table. He put his phone down between us. The photo on the screen was of a man, broad shoulders, sandy hair, maybe mid-30s. He was holding a little girl, 4, maybe 5 years old, up on his hip, and they were both laughing at something off camera. It was a candid shot, the kind a wife takes when her husband doesn't know she's looking. I didn't recognize him. "Who is this?" I asked. "His name is Kurt Hadley," Jonah said. "He lives in Greenville, South Carolina. He works in HVAC sales." He paused. "He has been married to Serena for 6 years. The kitchen was very quiet. "Show me again," I said. He slid the phone closer. I looked at the little girl. Dark hair, green eyes. "That's his daughter," Jonah said. "Her name is Mossy. She's 5. Kurt has been raising her mostly on his own for the past year because Serena told him she needed space. He thinks they're separated. He does not know she's getting married in 6 days. I sat back in my chair. My hands were in my lap and I couldn't feel them. "How do you know this?" I said. He took a breath. "My cousin Deb lives 2 streets over from Kurt Hadley. She recognized Serena from a photo I showed her. I was just showing family pictures from the engagement party. Nothing more than that." Deb said, "That woman looks just like Kurt's wife." I told her that couldn't be right. She sent me Kurt's Facebook. It took me about 10 minutes to be sure. 10 minutes, I said. "I'm sorry," he said. "I went back and forth on whether to tell you. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong." Maybe Deb was wrong. But the photos, Mrs. Miriam, the photos are right there. Same woman. I looked at the photo one more time. The little girl laughing. The man who had no idea what was coming. I stood up. I walked to the window. I stood there looking at the backyard. The hydrangeas Gerald and I planted the year Owen was born. The old oak tree Owen used to climb. And I made myself breathe. "Does Owen know?" I said. "No, ma'am." "Has anyone else seen this?" "Just Deb. And she doesn't know Owen." I turned around. "Jonah, I need you to give me a day." He nodded. He left without another word. I called Owen that evening. I kept my voice light. I asked if we could have lunch the next day. Just the 2 of us, before the week got too crazy. He said of course. He sounded happy. He sounded so happy. I barely slept. I lay in Gerald's side of the bed. I still sleep on my side all these years later, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about how to say it. How do you tell your son something like that? How do you hand him something that will break a part of him that might not fully heal? I thought about waiting. I thought maybe Jonah's cousin is wrong. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe Serena had been married before and the divorce was just pending, somehow, paperwork. And she hadn't told Owen because she was ashamed or scared or I stopped myself. I knew what I was doing. I was building a story to make it easier to stay quiet. And staying quiet, in this case, would not be kindness. It would be cowardice dressed up as kindness. Owen deserved to know. Lunch the next day was at the diner on Prescott Street that Owen had loved since he was a teenager. The one with the vinyl booths and the coconut cream pie that's been on the menu since 1987. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back booth, scrolling his phone with that easy half smile he's had since he was small. I sat down across from him. I watched him for a moment. The waitress came. We ordered coffee. Owen ordered the club sandwich. I ordered nothing. Mom, he said, you're making a face. I need to talk to you about something serious, I said. I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that? The smile faded. You're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. I folded my hands on the table. I need to tell you something about Serena. I told him everything, carefully, slowly, in the order that Jonah had told me. I watched his face move through every stage: confusion, dismissal, a flash of anger I knew was directed at me, then a stillness that was worse than the anger. When I finished, he was looking at the table. That's not possible, he said. I know it feels that way. Mom, that's not possible. Someone made a mistake. Will you look at the photos? He did. I had screenshots on my own phone. He took the phone from me and he looked at them for a long time. I watched his jaw tighten. I watched him swallow. He handed the phone back. I need to talk to her, he said. I know you do. Alone. Of course. He left $20 on the table for a coffee he hadn't finished and walked out. I sat in that booth for a while. The waitress came and refilled my cup without asking. I think she could tell. That night, Owen called me. He confronted Serena. He told me she had cried. Not the guilty kind of crying, but the furious kind, the how dare you kind. She told him his mother was delusional. She told him Jonah's cousin must have her confused with someone else. She said she had never been to Greenville in her life. She was convincing, Owen told me. His voice was flat and exhausted. She's very convincing. I know, I said. I don't know what to believe. I know that too. There was a long silence. The wedding is in 5 days, he said. I know. He didn't cancel it. I didn't ask him to, not outright. I understood. He needed to see for himself. He needed more than photographs and a second-hand story from a woman he'd never met. He needed something he couldn't argue with. And I didn't know if I could give him that before Saturday. Jonah came back the next morning. He had more. His cousin Deb had spoken to Kurt Hadley directly, carefully, without revealing everything, and Kurt had confirmed that as far as he knew, he and Serena were legally married and had never filed for divorce. He didn't know where she was. She had told him she was staying with a friend in Atlanta while she figured things out. He was confused and heartbroken and raising their daughter by himself, and he was not, by any definition of any law in any state, divorced. Jonah also had a copy of the marriage certificate. Deb had found it through public records. Kurt and Serena, married 6 years ago in Beaufort County, South Carolina. I held the printout in my hands. What do you want to do? Jonah asked. I want to end this before Saturday, I said. Cleanly, without destroying more people than necessary. I thought about the little girl in the photograph, Mossy. 5 years old, dark hair, green eyes. She had her mother's eyes. She didn't know where her mother was. I thought about that, and I had to set the paper down for a moment. I called a lawyer friend, a woman I'd known since our children were in middle school together, who specialized in family law. I told her the situation without using names. She told me what I needed to know. Then I called Owen. I told him I had the marriage certificate. I told him I was not asking him to take my word for it anymore. I was asking him to look at a piece of paper. He came over. He sat at my kitchen table in the same chair Jonah had sat in a few days before, and he looked at the document for a very long time. Then he looked up at me. She lied to me, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. For how long? From the beginning, as far as I can tell. He was quiet. Then, is there a child? I nodded. Something moved across his face. Not just hurt, something deeper than that. Something that comes from realizing that a person you loved was an entirely different person than you thought. I'll call the wedding off, he said. There's one more thing, I told him. The right thing to do is to let Kurt know. He has a right to know where his wife is. Owen closed his eyes. Yeah, he said. I know. We sat there together in my kitchen for a while. Neither of us spoke much. At one point, I made tea. That is what I do when I don't know what else to do. I make tea, which was my own mother's solution to everything and which I have judged her for and inherited entirely. Owen made the call to Serena that evening. He told me later that she cried again, and this time the crying shifted, became something softer, more desperate. She admitted, finally, that the marriage to Kurt existed. She said they had been separated for over a year. She said she had meant to divorce him, but the paperwork was complicated and she'd just let it go. She said it wasn't what it looked like. "What is it then?" Owen had asked her. She didn't have an answer for that. He told her the wedding was off. He told her he needed her to leave the apartment they'd begun sharing 3 months earlier. He told her she needed to call Kurt. She called me an hour later. I didn't answer. The venue was canceled. The flowers were canceled. Owen handled most of it himself, which broke my heart a little. That he had to make those calls, that he had to explain to 60 people that there wasn't going to be a wedding, not because love had failed, but because one person in the equation had never been who she said she was. His friends rallied around him. That part was good to see. 2 weeks after what would have been the wedding, I was sitting on my back porch with a glass of iced tea when Jonah's truck pulled into the driveway. He got out and walked around to the backyard and stood at the edge of the porch, and I handed him the other glass I'd already poured because I'd seen his truck turn onto my street from the kitchen window. "How's he doing?" Jonah asked. "Better than I expected," I said. "Worse than I want," Jonah nodded. "Kurt filed the paperwork," I said, "through a lawyer. Serena is back in Greenville. Or that's what I've heard. She and Kurt are divorcing properly now. The little girl is staying with her father." "Good," Jonah said. "Owen asked me something last week," I said. "He asked me how long I'd had a bad feeling about her, and I told him the truth. I said I'd noticed things, but I talked myself out of trusting what I noticed because I didn't want to be the mother who interferes." Jonah looked at me sideways. "What'd he say?" "He said I should have interfered sooner." I paused. I'm not sure he meant it, but I think part of him did. Jonah was quiet for a moment. "Then you didn't know sooner?" "No," I said, "but I felt it. There's a difference." We sat on that porch until the light changed and the fireflies started up in the grass, and I thought about Gerald, who would have known from the start. He had an instinct for people that I always admired and never fully inherited, but I thought I caught it, maybe slower than he would have, maybe later than I should have, but I caught it. Owen met someone new about 14 months later. Her name is Bridget. She's a physical therapist from Knoxville with a laugh that carries across a room and a habit of bringing food when she visits that reminds me, absurdly and specifically, of myself at her age. She asked me once, on her 3rd or 4th visit, if she could learn how to make the apple cake. I taught her. We stood in my kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, and I walked her through every step, and she wrote it all down in a little notebook she kept in her purse, and I thought, this is the one. I was right. They got married last spring. Owen called me from the parking lot of the restaurant where he proposed, and I could hear the grin before he said a single word. I said, "Tell me everything." He did, and I meant it. Every bit of gladness I felt, I meant completely. I think about Mossy sometimes, the little girl in the photograph, 5 years old, her mother's eyes. I hope she's okay. I hope her father is doing right by her. I have no way of knowing, and I have made my peace with not knowing, but I think about her. I think about Jonah too, who came to me with something hard because he decided that doing right by our family mattered more than staying comfortable. He still comes every 2 weeks. He still makes the best ribs I have ever eaten. I told him last fall that I was grateful, not just for what he did, but for who he is. He looked at me over the top of his sunglasses the same way he did the first Saturday after Gerald's funeral, and he said, "Mrs. Miriam, I know." I believed him. If you're listening to this and you have a feeling, that quiet, nagging, something is not right feeling that you keep talking yourself out of, I want you to hear me when I say this. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let the fear of being wrong keep you from asking the question, Don't let the fear of being that mother or that friend or that person, don't let that fear be worth more to you than the truth. The truth is almost always kinder in the long run than the silence you maintain to protect yourself from being uncomfortable. I know that now. I knew it before, honestly. I just needed one good man with a bad knee and a plate of ribs to remind me. I've thought a lot about the sequence of events that led to that evening. Jonah at my back door, hat in his hands, that careful look on his face. And the more I think about it, the more I believe that nothing about what happened was accidental, not in a mystical sense. I don't mean fate or some invisible hand arranging things. I mean something simpler and, I think, more true, that the choices people make accumulate. They build up quietly, like sediment, and eventually the weight of them becomes visible. Serena made choices. She chose to marry Kurt and then walk away from that marriage without ever legally ending it. She chose to find Owen, to learn what she could about our family, to perform warmth and easiness while keeping the most important fact of her life hidden. Those were not mistakes. They were decisions made over and over across years. And the thing about decisions like that is that they require constant maintenance. You have to keep lying. You have to keep managing. You have to keep track of which version of yourself you've shown to which person. That is an exhausting way to live. And in my experience, exhausting things eventually collapse under their own weight. I don't take satisfaction in what happened to her. I want to be honest about that. When I think about Serena, I don't feel triumphant. I feel something more like sad, because she was not unintelligent. She was not without charm. She could have built something real. She chose not to, and the life she built on pretense came apart the way all such things do. Not dramatically, not with warning, but quietly, through a single phone that Jonah's cousin recognized at a family gathering. That's the other thing I've thought about. Jonah. He didn't have to come to me. He could have told himself it wasn't his business, that he was the man who mowed my lawn and he had no standing in the private matters of our family. A lot of people would have done exactly that, and I would not have blamed them. But Jonah has a quality I've spent 19 years admiring without always naming it directly, and I think the name for it is moral courage. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that makes speeches or draws attention to itself. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up at a back door with a hat in its hands and says, I need to show you something, and I need you to hear me out. That kind of courage is rarer than people think. And it requires intelligence. The intelligence to understand that doing the right thing and doing the comfortable thing are not always the same thing, and to choose right anyway. Owen is alive to that now in a way he wasn't before. I can see it in how he moves through the world. He asks more questions. He pays more attention. He does not confuse someone's easiness with their honesty. And me, I learned something too, though I came to it slowly. I learned that the instinct that says something is not right is not paranoia. It is information. And dismissing it, patting it over with reasons why you're probably wrong, with the fear of being difficult, with the polite fiction that you must be imagining things, that is not wisdom. That is just a more socially acceptable form of looking away. I looked away for too long. I talked myself out of what I noticed because I was afraid of the label. I didn't want to be the interfering mother. I wanted to be generous and open-handed and easy to love. And those are not bad things to want. But they cannot cost you the truth. They cannot cost your son 2 years of his life, a marriage built on fraud, a future with a woman who had another family she'd simply stopped returning to. Owen and Bridget are happy. That is the fact I come back to when the rest of it gets heavy. He found his way to something real, and he did it with his eyes open, and I was there for that phone call too, the one from the parking lot, the grin before the words. That's what I have. That's what I hold on to. And Macy, the little girl in the photograph, 5 years old, her mother's green eyes. I hope she is okay. I hope her father is steady and loving, and that she grows up knowing she is wanted. I have no way of checking, but I hope